The alert lit my phone as I reached for the ignition. Urgent. O negative needed, active bleeding, Naval Medical Center, Norfolk, please share. I sat in my truck, one hand on the wheel, the engine ticking cool in the dark lot outside Joint Expeditionary Logistics Support Unit. I was exhausted after 16 hours in uniform, and I almost drove home. Those words echoed, active bleeding. 10 minutes later, I was on the road to give blood to someone I had never seen. I am Major Elena Ward, United States Army Medical Logistics Corps, and I have spent 20 years learning logistics faster than panic. That night we unloaded hurricane pallets under a wind that smelled of salt and diesel. By the time the last truck rolled away, my shoulders felt packed with sand. My world had narrowed to shower, sleep, repeat. Then the message came from a veterans group I followed out of habit. A hospital hallway, a plea in all caps, a blood type I knew by heart. O negative, universal donor. I told myself I was too tired, that someone else would go, but the post had been up 6 minutes, and the comment beneath it said only, "Please hurry." I looked at the empty lot and thought about every emergency I had ever served from a distance. This time the person was the point. "All right," I said. "Let's go." The drive into Norfolk was quiet enough for doubt to keep pace. When the hospital finally rose ahead of me, its windows glowed white against the night. I parked, walked through the emergency entrance, and followed a volunteer to the donor room. A nurse checked my arm and said I was one of the first matches they had seen. The needle stung, then settled. I watched blood move through the tube into the bag and tried not to think about the person waiting somewhere beyond the walls. When the bag filled, I felt oddly calm. That was when I noticed the man beside me. He had been there the whole time, though I had not seen him arrive. He was silver-haired, straight-backed in a plain jacket. He wore no visible rank, but he carried himself like command. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I heard what type you were." I told him it was a post. He studied me with a look that felt almost familiar. "Not everyone turns around," he said. I gave him my name. He repeated it once. "I appreciate you, Major Ward." Then the nurse came to tell him the transfusion was helping, and his shoulders dropped by a fraction. I drove home with a sore arm and a strange lightness in my chest. The next morning the routine resumed. Reports, inventory, briefings. 3 days later, a readiness review turned into a quiet reprimand. My commander told me I had left base without coordination. He called the decision personal. He called the reassignment temporary. I did not argue. I went to admin support and spent the next 2 weeks buried in spreadsheets while the flight line hummed outside my window. The work was dull, but I did it. One officer joked that compassion was not in the SOP. I told him neither was letting someone bleed while waiting for a form. In the evenings, I walked the waterfront and read the update posted by the veterans group. Donor found, patient stable, family grateful. That was enough. On Monday morning, Alvarez told me to report to the commander's office at 9. I expected another lecture. Instead, I opened the door and stopped cold, because the man from the donor room was sitting there in full dress uniform, 4 silver stars on his shoulders. My commander rose at once. "Major Ward," he said, "this is General Thomas Mercer, Deputy Commanding General, Army Medical Command." The general smiled, and I knew him instantly. "We met in Norfolk," he said. "My grandson was the patient." The room went still. He asked whether I had known who needed the blood. I said no. He asked why I went anyway. I told him because someone was bleeding and I could help. He nodded as if that answered everything. Then he told my commander that judgment mattered as much as procedure. He lifted the reassignment and recommended me for humanitarian logistics duty. Before he left, he shook my hand and said I had reminded him why the uniform exists. By dusk, I was back on the operations floor, the noise of engines and radios wrapping around me like home. A new directive followed, allowing officers to act on urgent civilian needs when time could not wait. I helped draft it. I carried the letter from the patient's family in my desk drawer for weeks. It said the boy was in school and wanted to grow up like the stranger who helped him. I have thought about that more than any medal. Some choices do not look heroic when you make them. They look like a truck in a dark lot, a phone screen, and a woman deciding not to drive past.